And stop me if you've already heard this before. The Ukrainian puppet dictator Zelensky says no to giving up any Ukrainian land, no Ukrainian land as part of any kind of peace deal. Not sure if he's aware, but those lands are now in Russian control. The latest numbers we're hearing at Redacted from our sources have Ukrainian dead now over 2 million. And I hope to have some updated numbers for you soon. So you don't hold any cards here, Zelensky, except the cards that NATO's puppet masters give you and your CIA handlers. But okay, so you're rejecting what appears to be the most likely method to finally end this proxy war. The peace process has failed. The European warmongers in the UK, France, and Germany have promised to continue funding Ukraine until the last, Ukrainian Christian man is essentially dead. So here, of course, was the meeting that they just held with his little friends there. It was Zelensky with his new girlfriends, Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Keir Starmer in London yesterday. Maybe they had some biscuits in the afternoon. He's being handled by these individuals now. Now, he said that Ukraine has no legal or moral grounds for surrendering its territory. Oh, you're concerned about things that are legal and moral now. Okay. Says the guy who canceled elections.
Closes churches, sends men to their death.
I love your moral high ground here. So what about the time right after you became president and you allegedly had that big sex party where you and your team were passing around 14-year-old girls? Yeah, I know all about that, and so do a lot of other people. Or the time, according to the New York Times, when you and your team stole billions of dollars from U.S. taxpayers and European taxpayers. You were funneling it to your own personal interests. Front page of the New York Times.
Can we just congratulate them for catching up to something we've been reporting for 3 years? Yeah, the Zelensky government's pretty corrupt. Way to catch up, New York Times.
Way to go.
This is timely news 3 years late.
Yeah, I mean, where was your moral compass when this was the headline on the front page of the New York Times? You know, basically you're basically sealing Ukraine's fate at this point. Joining us now is Scott Horton. He is the author of Provoked. He is also the chief bottle washer over at antiwar.com, one of the keenest minds of trying to prevent us into these endless regime change wars. No one knows more about this. Scott, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Thank you both for having me. Great to be here.
So I want to talk about this plan, and I want to talk about, basically what it just kind of came out of London specifically, because it's, to me, maybe I'm reading this totally wrong, but if you read the front page of Politico, what the U.S. wants from Ukraine, leave the Donbass one way or the other. That's the Trump position. That's the U.S. position. You're giving up land as part of this peace agreement. So he's there meeting with this European flock of seagulls, and they're driving him in a totally different direction, purposefully driving a wedge between these peace agreements. What do you make of this?
Well, it really comes back to the buck stops with Donald Trump, because as long as the Europeans are willing to keep forking over the cash, he's willing to keep forking over the weapons. And of course, usually goes unsaid, all of the actual logistical and intelligence support that the United States has been furnishing to the Ukrainian side this whole time. As long as he doesn't call that off, and that is his position of strength to play, such as it is in the war, is that he can keep financing the Ukrainian side. After all, it's not easy on the Russian side, although they are winning. And as you said, I mean, this is, and quite frankly, and as I know your audience understands, this has been the plan, really, since the beginning of the war, was to make the war last a longer time. In fact, there's a new article by a guy named Sergei Radchenko in Foreign Affairs, saying we can still inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. So they're implicitly conceding, all of them. They've known all along. This means Russia will march further and further west slowly, but at great cost to themselves too. And I don't know what the real casualty rates and totals are, and I don't know what the real total of rubles spent is. This war has been incredibly costly for the Russians. And so from Washington's point of view, that's the whole goal, is essentially with the Ukrainians as extras in the movie. They're just cannon fodder. In fact, in the book, I show, I'm I'm not really that good of a writer, so I just have collections of quotes of all these politicians and pundits saying, we are getting so much bang for our buck. We are killing Russians on the cheap. We're sending home coffins. We're sending home body bags. We're sending home Russian bodies. But no American soldiers are dying.
Yeah, right. Total
And
lie.
then they'll say that over and over again with not even a mention of the Ukrainians' costs at all.
Well, and that's a total lie, Scott, isn't it?
Society.
I mean, I'm working on this right now, but I mean, that's a total lie. And I want to know by the way, if any families are watching right now that have had to like sign an NDA because your son was killed in Ukraine in the United States, and the only reason that you're not talking about it is because you signed an NDA to receive death benefits from the United States government. I want to know how many Americans have actually died in Ukraine, because it's not zero.
Yeah, that's a real good question. You know, they've admitted from time to time that they have clandestine forces there, special operations forces and CIA, special activities division and so forth, helping to coordinate. They deny that they have them fighting on the ground. But then, of course, they have the so-called volunteers, just like on the Russian side, like the Chinese in the Korean War, the volunteers who go and fight, and many of them paid mercenaries, as you're saying, and I don't know if anybody really knows the numbers there. But look, the whole thing's tragic. As you know, the Russians are winning slowly. They will take the last quarter or so of Donetsk eventually. I don't know how long it will take, but they've already got all of Luhansk. And it looked like, and I'm not sure, you know, because all the reporting out of the talks it was, you know, kind of sparse and contradictory, but it seemed like at least the original proposal hashed out by Witkoff and what's his name, the friend of the Kremlin, what included, as I think we talked about this before last time, the possibility at least of the Russians freezing the lines at Zaporozhye and Kherson. They insist on all of Donetsk, but maybe they'll stop at where they are at Zaporozhye and Kherson. If people look at the map, that's the whole Azov coast there, the so-called land bridge between the Donbass and the Crimean Peninsula, and their ability to guarantee fresh water to Crimea from the Dnieper River, which the previous regime had cut off. And so, in fact, for the Russians to cross the river and take Kherson on the far side of the river, like after the war is over and they just get over there, like, you know, cross, that's one thing. But taking that land by force would be extraordinarily difficult, just as the Ukrainians have had an incredibly difficult time trying to dislodge them from the other side of the river over these last 2 years. So there is basis for compromise here. In other words, look, the Russians are not giving up Zaporozhye and Kherson, but if they're willing to draw the lines where they are, that's the best you're going to get. But see, look at the politics from Kiev's side. Kiev doesn't want to order their troops to turn around and withdraw from land where they still stand and fight, right? They don't, and politically, you know, as again, I'm sorry, because I know you guys know this, but there are very hard right-wing nationalist forces in Ukraine who have for years threatened to murder this president and his predecessor, Poroshenko, too, if they would to dare compromise with the Russians and end this war. The plan is to just win someday, or at least lose by just total defeat. But if you compromise and if you lose at the peace table, you sign a deal, then that's the stab in the back. That's betraying, on the sunk cost fallacy, all the heroes who've died in the war so far. And Zelensky knows that he's really in no position because of those domestic pressures, never mind from what he's getting from Washington and London, that if he ends the war on anything but an absolutely has to basis, then his life is forfeit, potentially.
What if the censored medicine that saved millions during the pandemic was being made mostly in China today? It's true. About 80% of the world's ivermectin supply comes from Asia, but not at the wellness company. Introducing American-made ivermectin, safe, trusted, tested, and produced locally in Florida. Ivermectin has been prescribed globally for more than 30 years and even earned the Nobel Prize in Medicine for its proven ability to eliminate parasites. But after the success of treating COVID, emerging research shows the wonder drug can actually help with everything, from rosacea, arthritis, even cancer. Most pharmacies charge $5 a tablet for 12 milligrams or less, but the wellness company is offering a higher 18 milligram dose for just $3.50 per tablet. You get a 6-month supply of 84 tablets at an unbeatable price. So support American medicine and patriotic doctors, not China's supply chain. Get your U.S.-made ivermectin today at twc.health/redacted. Use the code redacted to save $30 off plus free shipping.
Right. I mean, think about the lost lives from 2022 until now, when there were peace negotiations in Istanbul and Russia offered to freeze the line then. So all of this territory they never had to lose. So now they're saying we won't give that up. They've lost it. They could have kept it, plus thousands of lives. This is not like, oh, I wish I hadn't lost money. These are people, human lives. So I don't know how he's not going straight to hell for this. I guess that's not up to you or me, so that's not really a question. One question I have is that why does he have to be in Europe for this peer pressure to happen? Is it so there's no paper trail of the Boris Johnsons of the world who are talking him into continuing the war? Or, I mean, all we get from it are these really dumb influencer sizzle reels where it's like music and him walking up to Macron and they're hugging and then the inspirational war optics. It's so dumb. Who is that for? And is there another purpose for him to be going to Europe in person?
Well, a couple things. First of all, you're absolutely right that the Russians' demands did not include Zaporozhye and Kherson until September of 2022, long after peace could have been concluded if the U.S. and U.K. had allowed it. So you're 100% right about that, and that is pure evil, what they did. It's just horrific, the way that they, first of all, let this war commence when they could have prevented it through honest diplomacy, but then the way they deliberately sabotaged the peace talks when they could have prevented the war from getting that much worse. And to think that that was, years ago now is just, it's crazy. As far as Zelensky going around, it's really hard to say. Sometimes these trips, they're just, they're all scripted beforehand and everybody knows exactly what's going to happen. And other times, not so much. Other times you really have leaders coming with specific questions, specific demands, or conditions or what. And I think Zelensky is in a very tough position here. And because he knows the Europeans they can't really afford them, to continue to bankroll his war for very long. This is all directly, in America, somehow they get away with just printing the money. Well, whatever. I don't know. Maybe they don't get away with it. But over there, they feel really constrained as far as their budgets. They are literally cutting programs for their own, social welfare in order to pay for the war instead, that kind of thing. And so they're very limited politically as how far they can go. So it's possible that he's there actually really to kiss up to them and beg them to keep the money flowing. And I think I'm very curious about what you guys think of this, actually, because, it's easy to consider them all just nothing but the worst liars all the time. But then again, there really is a syndrome of these people believe in their own BS a lot of the times, too. And some of the time, the European leaders sound like they truly are afraid of Russia. And they truly think that the Russians, maybe they're not going to march all the way, to Poland, but that soon they'll take the Baltics. And after the Baltics, then maybe Poland. And you know what I mean? They really do seem to be, they say it so often. I wonder if they're telling the truth about what they really think at all,
If you ever, I was a Seinfeld fan, and it's like Costanza, he reminded Jerry, he said to Jerry one time, he said, Jerry, remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. Right. Yeah. So George was the best liar of them all. Right. And so I think they've repeated it to themselves so many times that Russia is going to invade Europe over and over and over again. They say that they actually believe it. And then, of course, it's pushed out on propaganda on the media. And, of course, the clampdown on censorship across that country and social media. So you can't do what we're doing here on Redacted and tell the truth. Putin responded to this, I think, this morning. Putin came out and said, he's like, we laugh about it. We have absolutely zero interest in invading Europe. He said, we actually kind of laugh about it. He's like, because European leaders will tell their people that we're going to invade, and we're shocked by it. We have no intention of doing that, and we laugh about it. He's like, but the reason that they're lying to you It's because they want this war. They want to keep funneling this money into this war, into this proxy war, and they can't admit defeat. So, I mean, Putin addressed it kind of head on this morning.
Yeah, well, no surprise.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because, okay, you do have, and this is the so-called, people always take this out of context, but this is what Putin was talking about when he was complaining about the fall of the Soviet Union, was that it was a disaster for ethnic Russians who were so-called left behind, right? This is what this one expert called a beached diaspora, where the Russian borders withdrew, but ethnic Russians were left behind, especially in Kazakhstan, but also in Ukraine and in Estonia and Lithuania. I think not as much Latvia. I might have that wrong. But like, for example, there's this town in eastern Estonia. I think it's called Nesta. I always say it wrong. I'm sorry. But it's a very Russian town in eastern Estonia. And it was always a Russian town, going back. These lines are always pretty fluid, but it had been a Russian town. It's full of ethnic Russians now. But the thing is, what you don't have there is an ongoing civil war where these people are being bombed and where the peace deals have been scotched and the thing just keeps getting, continue on for 7 years in a row with no end in sight, no resolution in sight, and build up of their military forces and all of these things. If that was the case, then yes, I think you would see the Russians redraw that border by force before it got too far out of hand. And so, yes, I think essentially that's right, that they pushed this lie in order to obfuscate from the fact that there was an ongoing crisis in Ukraine that their war was meant to solve. Not that it really did. They really escalated the crisis by a hell of a lot. But there was something happening in Ukraine that is not happening in Estonia. So could he just send his guys in there? I mean, maybe. But as long as the people of Eastern Estonia are free and they're not clamoring for Russian protection, then that remains very unlikely. And especially when, yes, they are members of NATO. And who knows exactly what America would do if they really crossed those lines.
Now, it's interesting, this Trump admission, Zelensky has no power. He doesn't have the cards here. And Russia has the cards, that Russia's in a better position. That was according to the Politico article this morning. And we've known that for a very long time, but the Biden administration refused to admit it. The Trump administration has been saying it all along, but it's kind of showing us how little power President Trump himself has to stop it, because it seems pretty easy to me. Stop the weapons, stop the money, stop the intelligence. They're left holding the bag. They have to come to the peace negotiation. So what does this tell us about President Trump's power to end this war? Is it overstated? And if so, who's pulling the strings? Well,
I don't want to give him like too much credit or anything, but I just to acknowledge the difficult position that he's in here. Imagine a situation where America's backing the Palestinian resistance against the Israelis, right? And then we turn around and leave them high and dry. In fact, maybe we help get them into this fight and get them bombed to smithereens. And we prolong it and prolong it, and then turn around and leave them. And that's kind of the situation in Ukraine. In Israel-Palestine, we back the bully. In Ukraine, America's backing the defenders who have been invaded and are losing their territory. So to just turn around and leave them high and dry is bad PR for President Trump. And see, the thing is, the position he's in too is he knows that the Russians know that they're winning and they don't have to stop now. What reason can he give them to stop now? Is he has to be able to make a bunch of big promises to them, but he also, he thinks at least, has to be able to threaten that, hey, look, I can keep financing Zelensky's side of this thing forever. And so that's his real only card that he has to play. Otherwise, what's he going to do? He's just going to tell, and this is what I would do, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, all things being equal politically and Donald Trump being Donald Trump, not Ron Paul, he's not going to tell Zelensky, that's it. I really mean it this time. Mm-hmm. No more weapons, no more money, no more nothing. I demand that you essentially unconditionally surrender to the Russians. He's just not going to do that. And so instead, what's going to happen is the Russians are going to continue to win the war slowly until they win it all at once. And I don't know how long that'll be, but time is clearly on their side, as Trump and you just acknowledged. That's the simple situation there. So,
Scott, how much time does Ukraine have left in its current position?
I really don't know. I mean, hell, I had no idea that they could possibly last this long. I mean, they showed that they have no offensive capability whatsoever in the spring of 23 when they launched their failed offensive of 23. And it's been, even that was nothing. So it's been really downhill since September of 22 for them.
Yeah, and over 2 million dead.
Slowly rolling downhill.
Yeah.
And look, they've got conscription. It's a very big country. It's, you know, a couple of 10 million people. It's the size of Texas. So there are still fighting age males aplenty out west to be conscripted and sent out to fight. So as long as America and Europe are still there providing weapons, you know, I don't know. It could come down to like whatever, a certain number of talented officers are killed and there's just nobody left to lead on the ground there. But as far as like continuing to come up with infantrymen, apparently they can.
Well, if you look at, you know, RIA.ru is Russian state media, and they keep a pretty reliable map of the line, of where the front line is, the territory Russia has gained, and where they intend to end. So that's a good resource, as I always look at. And you normally see that the blue dots, which represent the Ukrainian army, are usually not stationed along the front lines. They just aren't there. And so they can sort of prolong this war by just not being there. They usually have, I would say, I'm looking at it right now, like maybe a third, less than a third of their army is even stationed on the front line. The rest is north of the war along the Russian border. So they can keep this going without continuously, you know what I mean? That's what I think seems to be their strategy, because I'm always watching these dots like a, you know, battleship game, and they just don't move. They don't move down into the front line. So it seems to me that's the tactic. But I don't know. I would have to run that by a military expert.
Yeah. And look, one of the reasons I favor the more conservative estimates of the casualties is because even though you do have the muddy, frozen trenches and the artillery and the tanks and all of that stuff from the First World War, I don't think you really have these massive waves of men being slaughtered at the thousands and thousands and thousands a day, 10,000 a day, this kind of thing on the World War I type of level. If you read the Washington Post in 2002, sure, that was how the Russians were fighting. But I don't think there's any real evidence of that you ever had, like these, you know, the Somme or whatever, like these mass casualties on the battlefield. I think guys are getting chewed up by the tens and hundreds a day. Yeah. And so
it's horrible.
You know, it's ugly as hell, but it unfortunately is sustainable for both sides, right? To keep going. The Russians keep winning slowly and the Ukrainians keep losing slowly. If we had the same conversation in 1 year, I wouldn't be shocked.
All right. Well, we'll make an appointment. Thank you so much, Clayton. Do you want to pull up the map?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clayton's trying to show the map that I was just referring to from his laptop. And again, it's in Russian. But if you look, the blue dots are the Ukrainian army, and they are mostly along the northern Russian border. And there's a few where the Russian army is, the Ukrainian army is not. Where they're along the front lines is down south, close to Crimea and Odessa, but there's no Russian troops there. So
But see, I think
it's not a lot of head-to-head combat here. That seems to be why it's able to linger in this horrific way.
Yeah. Well, see, those dots, though, represent the larger concentrations of forces. Where the fighting is taking place, it's 6 guys fighting 10. Yeah. This kind of thing. Real small unit warfare up and down the line.
And that's why it's taking so long.
Yeah.
Scott Horton, always great to see you. Thank you so much. Check out.
Oh, I was going to say, check out the Scott Horton Academy if you have not already. It's a great rundown of some of the most important conflicts in modern times and U.S. history as well. So fantastic university's just been launched. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Scott.